Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're not just looking at a resume, we're analyzing an entire intellectual and spiritual cosmology.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Our sources give us this truly, this rare portrait of a life that was dedicated equally to the rigorous pursuit of justice in the courtroom, and then also to the delicate, transformative creation of poetry on the page.
It's almost a paradox.
It is.
Yeah.
So we're diving deep into the world and work of Manuel del Valle y Colón, particularly focusing on his volume, Omnibus Poetry XLVI. Precious.
It's a fascinating synthesis, isn't it? I mean, you often encounter people who achieve true mastery in one really demanding field, constitutional law or judicial administration or complex poetry.
Right, one or the other.
Exactly. But Del Valle y Colón, he operated at the highest levels of influence and excellence in both domains. And this is the critical part. He utilized the same intellectual and spiritual vocabulary for each.
That's what we need to unpack.
Right. Our mission here is to understand the alchemy that made that possible, to figure out how he connected the docket sheet to the devotional lyric.
Exactly. And we have this dense, rich stack of sources. We have biographical details, academic records from Yale and Princeton, accounts of landmark civil rights achievements, deep cultural explorations, and specific, deeply moving excerpts from his poetry.
It's a complete roadmap. It's a shortcut, really, to understanding an incredibly complex and, well, a well-lived life. But we have to go beyond just the headlines and really explore the mechanisms.
Yeah, how did it all fit together?
And we absolutely must start with the title itself, Precious. The dedication immediately sets the tone and the scope, and it moves far beyond just a single language or a single location.
It really does. It's presented as Kowide in Chinese
Kichuna in Japanese.
and Lako in Thai.
And that's not just, some kind of international flair. It's a statement of cultural mission right from the get-go.
That multilingual dedication signals a global perspective, but one that's filtered through intensely personal experience. The core theme is baked right in. The collection is dedicated to those called precious, and it celebrates the precious thing that is life, its inherent beauty, its inevitable conflicts, with this explicit goal of reconciliation and finding harmony.
And that word, harmony, I think that's the bridge. That's what connects his law work and his poetry. It's the search for harmony in both.
I think you're right.
The summary statement we have on him, what we can sort of call the biographer's view, it reinforces this mission. It describes him as a rare voice of authenticity, intellect, and creativity, but it emphasizes that he doesn't just live life.
Right.
He interprets, examines, and elevates it through words, vision, and action.
And that's where the tension lies, isn't it?
Mm.
The lawyer has to interpret and examine the law, and the poet has to interpret and examine the soul. He's doing both.
With the same toolkit.
That phrase, interprets, examines, and elevates, that's our mandate for this deep dive. It implies that every single experience, whether it's a hard-fought court case requiring intense intellectual rigor or a moment of quiet spiritual reflection, it all becomes material for a deeper public and personal understanding.
Now we're going to unpack that.
We're going to unpack how this journey from New York City housing projects to Ivy League halls, and finally to writing poetry rooted in global spiritual traditions, created this unique, synthesized perspective. We are connecting the courtroom to the cosmos, and we're going to find out precisely how those connections were built.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start at the foundation in part one, the roots of an advocate. Manuel del Valle Colón was born in East Harlem, New York City in 1948. He was the eldest son of parents who hailed from Hatillo and Moca in Puerto Rico.
So his formative years were, they were steeped in the specific environment of that urban crucible that was New York in the post-war era. It was a really intense time. He spent his early childhood in the housing projects, moving from the Carver houses to the Douglas projects in the mid-1950s. He attended the local public schools PS 72 and PS 179 before getting into the highly competitive Brooklyn Technical High School in 1962.
And that foundation, being in East and West Harlem, it's just so essential to understanding his later, his relentless advocacy for community rights and representation.
It is. But what's immediately striking, though, is that this strong local grounding was paired with this massive expansion of his cultural horizons, even when he was just a young man.
Yeah, our sources highlight his deep cultural curiosity, spanning Thai, Chinese, Japanese, and even Taino traditions.
And the sources are very, very specific that this wasn't just some surface-level tourism or a casual interest. This exploration was undertaken through immersive respect and deep translation, both linguistic and emotional.
Deep translation. I love that phrase.
It's key. That concept is key to understanding everything that comes later, both his poetry and his law. It implies absorbing not just vocabulary, but the whole philosophical and spiritual frameworks that language carries with it.
It's the origin of that global perspective we saw in the dedication of Precious. He explicitly thanks his Chinese, Thai, and Japanese teachers for expanding his linguistic, cultural, and spiritual vocabulary.
And that enriched vocabulary is what allowed him later on to seamlessly bridge the dense legal jargon he needed in the courts with these ancient mythologies and spiritual tenets in his poetry. It's the same language, just a different application.
Okay, so let's get to his high school years.
Ugh.
Brooklyn Tech, which the sources frame as a crucible.
And rightly so. This was where his intellectual ambition was really forged. I mean, he was involved in practically everything.
The list is kind of incredible.
It is. The Free World Club, the Debating Society, the Survey, manager of the fencing team, and critically, the polling squad, which actually conducted polling for New York City elections.
So he was involved in civic life and I guess, the measurement of political will from the very beginning.
From the jump. But what's truly fascinating about his time there is the insight we get from his peers. He actually included their yearbook inscriptions in Precious as part of what he calls his Precious Archive.
And they are so telling. They're incredibly telling about his early reputation.
They clearly saw him as a future intellectual and political force, not just another classmate.
The titles they gave him are just astonishing. He was dubbed the amateur historian, his cohort's favorite philosopher, the best history student in the school, and my personal favorite, the king of quotes.
Right. This isn't just about being a good student. This indicates he was the intellectual center of gravity, the person everyone went to for context, for analysis, for perspective.
And their projections for his future were, well, they were almost prophetic. They weren't just saying good luck.
No, not at all. We see inscriptions like, to the power behind the throne.
Which is pretty intense for a high school yearbook.
Very. And lots of luck, Congressman. And then the incredibly ambitious one. May you be involved in a historical cataclysmic occurrence.
Wow. I mean, that's some heavy stuff to put on a high school kid.
It is, but it suggests his classmates intuitively knew he was destined to be a participant in, and also a chronicler of, moments of monumental political and social change. It speaks to this deep early confidence in his intellectual destiny that he then just carried forward.
And that ambition was immediately channeled into tangible action. This brings us to the Aspira years and his public service mentorship.
Exactly. While he was still in high school, he was deeply involved in the Aspira movement, which, for those who don't know, is the Puerto Rican equivalent of something like the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, with a heavy focus on youth development and education advocacy.
And he wasn't just a member. He was elected Issues and Actions chairman of the Aspira Clubs Federation.
This was a pivotal moment for him. This is where he really cut his teeth as an advocate. He wasn't just self-taught. He was trained by some of the giants of Puerto Rican advocacy and community organizing.
We're talking about Antonia Pantoja, the founder of Aspira.
A legend.
Yolanda Sanchez, who was the executive director of the East Harlem Tenants Council, and Isora Santiago, who would later become president of Hostos Community College.
Being trained by figures like Antonia Pantoja meant he learned the strategies of community organizing, of nonprofit mobilization, and grassroots political action before he ever stepped foot inside a law school.
Right.
This mentorship connected him directly to the real-world fight for education and representation. And just look at his peers from that time. Wilfredo Caraballo, who became a tenured law professor and the New Jersey public advocate. Fernando Ferrer, former Bronx borough president.
He was moving in the circles that were quite literally charting the future of New York's political landscape.
No question. And his academic path was just as unique as his cultural pursuits, which further illustrates his self-directed focus. After Brooklyn Tech, it wasn't a standard 4-year college track.
No, he went to the Yale Transitional Year Program, or TYP, from 1966 to 1967.
And the TYP was a program designed to give a more culturally and academically diverse group of students an opportunity to transition into the rigors of the Ivy League system. It often provided this critical bridge year.
So it was an incubator for him.
In a way, yes. This experience allowed him to hone his research and writing skills in a really focused environment before he moved on to Wesleyan University.
And at Wesleyan, his learning was immediately applied to activism, continuing that thread from Aspira. He used something called a Hof grant during his time there to research identity issues.
And importantly, he received college credit for actively recruiting minority students for colleges through the Edwin Gould Foundation.
So he was already institutionalizing the mentorship and community building he had learned back in Harlem. He's building the pipeline.
He is. And his intellectual restlessness just continued with international and cultural immersion. In the summer of '69, he studied Spanish literature in Madrid, and then he immersed himself in Puerto Rican history, literature, and political science at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras.
And again, he didn't just attend courses there. Our sources say he prepared a full course syllabus during that summer.
Which shows he wasn't merely consuming knowledge, he was actively structuring it, preparing to teach it. This deep cultural foundation, spanning the global and the local, it provided the historical context that was absolutely necessary for his later legal work and, of course, the rich thematic material for all of his poetry.
That incredible journey led him to Princeton University in 1969, which brings us to part 2 of our deep dive. Law, scholarship, and legacy, the fight for change.
Right. At Princeton, he majored in history, Latin American studies, and Afro-American studies, a very interdisciplinary focus.
But Princeton wasn't just a destination for him. It became his platform for institutional change within the Ivy League itself. He didn't just attend classes, he organized.
He really did. He founded the Latino organization on campus, he actively recruited students, and he successfully championed this massive curricular shift. He received university approval for instituting one of the first Ivy League seminars on the history and politics of Puerto Rico.
And that's a huge deal. You have to put that in context.
Oh, absolutely. He was integrating the marginalized histories he had studied in Rio Piedras and the work he did in Harlem directly into the mainstream academic structure of Princeton. He was demanding that these elite institutions recognize and teach the histories of the communities he came from.
He was changing the canon.
In a very real way.
Okay.
And this convergence of rigorous scholarship and immediate activism, it all peaked with his senior thesis. It was titled, A History of the Puerto Rican Student and Public Education, 1945-1969.
And this wasn't just an academic exercise gathering dust on a shelf. It had immediate, real-world consequences.
This is the phenomenal trajectory. A chapter from that thesis was incorporated into a memorandum that was drafted for Senator Jacob Javits.
Okay.
This memo was then used by the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund, Inc., or PRLDEF, to frame the legal complaint that would ultimately redefine civil rights in education.
So wait, let's trace that. High school activism leads to deep scholarly research at Princeton.
Yep.
And then that research becomes the academic pillar supporting a major civil rights lawsuit before he even finished his law degree.
It's an incredible flow. He then went straight to Yale Law School, graduating in 1974, and he was there with notable figures like Clarence Thomas and Lonnie Guarnier.
And after Yale, he immediately put his learning into practice at the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund, PRLDEF, as a trial attorney.
We should probably clarify for the listener, PRLDEE was, and still is, the functional equivalent of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, but for the Puerto Rican community. It's dedicated to achieving structural change through litigation.
And his time there, even though it was brief, it was defined by truly groundbreaking cases. Let's not just list the titles. Let's understand the impact. First, Aspiravi Board of Education of the City of New York. This case was massive.
Huge. The case successfully challenged the Board of Education's failure to provide adequate services for limited English-speaking students. And it didn't just yield a favorable ruling.
No, it resulted in a legally binding consent decree.
And a consent decree, for anyone unfamiliar, is essentially a court-approved agreement that carries the weight of a legal mandate. This one required the New York City school system to implement comprehensive, system-wide bilingual education programs.
So what did that mean for an actual family living in New York at the time?
It meant everything. This wasn't a minor change. It fundamentally shifted how tens of thousands of children and future generations received their public education. It ensured they had the legal right to learn effectively while acquiring English proficiency. It validated their identity and their language.
It's justice on a systemic level.
Yeah.
And the practical justice continued with another case, Bobon v. Levine.
That's right. This case dealt with the critical issue of access to safety nets, basic economic survival.
How so?
It successfully mandated that Puerto Rican and Spanish-speaking claimants seeking New York State unemployment insurance benefits receive bilingual notice. Before this, non-English speakers could miss critical deadlines or fail to understand their rights, losing vital unemployment income simply due to language barriers.
Just because they couldn't read the form.
Exactly. Pabon ensured that linguistic exclusion was addressed, opening up access to economic security for an entire community. This is justice on the ground, affecting daily lives in a very real way.
But even while establishing himself as this powerhouse trial attorney, he continued to be the scholar and the mentor. He taught undergraduate courses at Yale on the history and politics of Puerto Rico and founded the undergraduate organization Despierta Boricua.
He was clearly a magnetic force. His students from that period, they went on to become major leaders in their own right. People like Judge Eduardo Padro, Gilbert Casellas, who became the first Puerto Rican chairman of the EEOC,
Wow.
Dr. Arnaldo Cruz, and Professor Howard Jordan. He wasn't just teaching history, he was training future policymakers and judges. He was building the next generation.
And the power of his early influence is just perfectly captured in this anecdote involving Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
It's an amazing story.
He taught at Princeton School of Public and International Affairs when he first met her. And when she later wrote the inscription in his copy of her memoir, My Beloved World, she offered perhaps the highest praise imaginable.
Her words were, "Manuel, you are my first role model, someone with a passion for fighting for change. Thank you for all you have done for so many and for what you continue to do."
I mean, to be cited by a sitting Supreme Court justice as your first role model in the fight for change, that speaks volumes about the depth of respect and the lasting impact of his early advocacy work.
It really does. And his scholarly focus just deepened from there with major advanced fellowships. From 1983 to 84, he was selected as one of only 17 Americans for a Rockefeller Foundation Fellowship.
And he used it to study at the London School of Economics, preparing a thesis on the complex jurisprudence of Puerto Rico before the U.S. Supreme Court, a work that was subsequently published.
And this is where we see that intense intellectual demand for synthesis. Analyzing the constitutional and statutory status of Puerto Rico before the highest court in the nation requires mastery of history, political science, and incredibly dense legal doctrine. He was applying his whole interdisciplinary foundation to solve these major structural questions.
He followed that up with a Ford Foundation Fellowship from 86 to 87. Again, one of only 17 researchers selected nationwide, this time to investigate national origin discrimination against Hispanics.
This research was a huge undertaking. It resulted in a comprehensive 400-page monograph.
And for our audience who craves the technical details, this research was distilled and published as an article toward a language-based national origin modality in the Harvard Journal of Hispanic Policy.
Right, and this modality proposed a specific new legal argument for how national origin discrimination claims should be analyzed when the core basis of the discrimination is language or accent. He was pushing the boundaries of legal protection.
So you see this consistent, rigorous pattern. Research the societal problem deeply, publish the complex legal analysis, and then use that knowledge base to drive litigation and policy change.
It's a full-stack approach to justice, and his career culminated in major judicial leadership roles. After spending over a decade as a trial attorney for the U.S. Department of Labor, he became the chief administrative law judge of the New York State Division of Human Rights from 1991 to 1995.
This was a historic appointment. He was the first Puerto Rican to ever hold that position.
And he immediately used the platform to effect progressive change within the system. We know he was instrumental in making the adjudication of racial and sexual harassment cases, along with AIDS discrimination cases, a high priority.
Which was so important at that time.
Crucial. In a system often slow to recognize new forms of discrimination, he ensured the legal mechanisms actively protected the most vulnerable, particularly those facing prejudice based on their health status or identity.
And he brought his career full circle, spending many years from 2004 to 2020 as an administrative law judge and then chief ALJ for the Social Security Administration, working out of the San Juan, Puerto Rico hearing office.
Which brings us back to the central question we have to ask. How did this man, who dedicated decades to the relentless, often emotionally draining pursuit of justice through dense legal texts and administrative hearings, find the space, or maybe the necessity, for creating poetry rooted in global mythology?
That is the perfect narrative tension. The law requires objectivity and proof. Poetry demands subjectivity and vulnerability. Was the poetic identity the necessary counterweight to the demands of the judicial role? That's what we need to explore next.
That pivot is everything. I think the law informed the poetry by providing the stark evidence of human conflict and injustice.
Yeah.
But the poetry tempered the law by offering a pathway to reconcile that conflict. It was a search for harmony that legal statutes alone just can't provide.
So they weren't separate parts of his life. They were in dialogue with each other.
Constantly. His poetry volumes, especially the Omnibus poetry series, they trace these journeys through identity, mythology, spirituality, cultural memory. It's all in there.
And Precious serves as a kind of philosophical syllabus, a poetic guidebook for how he navigated the world. The 9 core themes he uses to organize the collection, they reflect everything we just discussed about his legal career, his cultural curiosity, and his quest for synthesis.
Exactly. So let's look at the structure he built. We begin with theme 1, ancestry, roots, and lineage.
Okay.
This explores shared origins, intergenerational bonds, and cultural inheritance. For a civil rights lawyer focused on community identity, this is about recognizing the past as the source of current strength and obligation. It's foundational.
Right, it's a where we come from. Yeah. The next is memory, remembrance, and hearing. This focuses on injuries healed over time, the fragility of bodies, and the strength of memory.
Which you can almost see as the poet's equivalent of the legal archive.
How do you mean?
Well, it's about preserving the truth of what happened, not just for a judgment, but for healing. The law seeks to resolve an injury. The poetry seeks to heal the wound itself. It's a different kind of record keeping.
That makes sense. Third is destiny, choice, and personal power. Here, he examines freedom, risk, movement, and self-created paths versus predetermined fate.
And this is the intellectual outgrowth of his youth activism. It's about empowering individuals, especially marginalized youth, to seize control of their own narratives, to reject the idea that their fate is locked in by circumstance.
The fourth theme feels like the center of gravity. Love is a core transformative element.
It's the anchor. Love is a guiding principle, a healing force, a stabilizer during chaos, and a moral anchor. In a judicial career defined by conflict and human rights violations, this theme provides the necessary moral compass for the entire endeavor. Without it, the work would be unbearable.
Right. Fifth, creativity, art, and the artist's journey. This speaks directly to the duality we're exploring.
Yep. The transformation of life's wounds into art, the sacrifices artists must make, and the interplay between creation and vulnerability. The source mentions this image of a designer with a black band-aid. The wound is visible, but the creative output continues, transformed by that pain.
Theme number 6 moves into that global spiritual realm, spirituality, myth, and the sacred.
And this covers cosmic creation, elemental forces, spiritual guardianship, ancient rituals. This is the Taino, Chinese, and Thai research translated into the lyric, that deep translation we spoke of earlier. It provides these universal frameworks for understanding the local struggle for justice.
Following that is nature as reflection and companion. Nature is presented as an archive of truth, a non-judgmental stage for love and identity, and a stark reminder of our own impermanence and vulnerability.
In the frantic, often concrete-laden environment of New York City and the courtroom, the natural world offers grounding and an eternal perspective. It's a necessary escape.
The 8th theme is childhood, vulnerability, and growth. This revisits the discipline and the wounds that shape our identity, emphasizing the preciousness of early experiences.
And given his foundational work in Asper v. Board of Education, focusing on the preciousness of children's education and rights is not just philosophical for him, it's professional. It's his life's work.
And finally, the 9th theme brings it all home. Cultural identity and language,
Whoa.
belonging, cross-generational transmission of language, the intimacy of shared origin.
This is the direct lyrical expression of his work at PRLDEF. It's about fighting for the right to belong and to be heard and understood in one's own tongue, recognizing that language is the container of identity. If you lose the language, you risk losing everything.
So it is, in essence, this complex manual for modern living, built on a foundation of legal rigor and ancient wisdom. He created a structured argument for how you can remain whole and find harmony in a world that feels like it's designed for fragmentation. So, now we get to the heart of the collection, part 4, the nuggets of insight. These are the specific poetic moments, the vignettes, where his philosophical structure really crystallizes into narrative. Let's start with a poetry that deals with conflict and destiny, specifically the generational clash.
Yes, there's a really powerful scene described where an angry father tells his son to kneel down until he's given permission to stand up. The legal mind immediately sees the dynamic of power and coercion there.
Sure.
But the poetic insight elevates it. The source states that regardless of the parents' words or commands, there is no way they can stop the universe from evolving.
The child, in this perspective, belongs to a world yet unborn, ready to be defined by their own creativity and experimentation. The parent, however, is depicted as time's prisoner, clinging to a past that no longer exists or, frankly, shouldn't be replicated.
And the crucial takeaway is that this clash isn't a failure. It's inevitable. It's even preordained, because new life must push against the constraints of the old. Reconciliation, therefore, has to lead to a harmony where only love prevails. It's an argument for necessary and sometimes painful evolution.
That same tension is revisited in well, a far sadder vignette. The parent who slaps his son for choosing his own friends and, in that anger, fails to say the crucial words, "I love him."
The poetic consequence is immediate and devastating. Love negation leads only to conflict, confusion, and departure. The poem asserts that the child's ultimate heritage is freedom and liberation.
This is the core of his advocacy applied to the personal sphere. Self-determination is paramount, whether you're up against governmental authority or familial authority.
It's the same principle, and this philosophy feeds directly into his powerful declaration on purpose. The phrase, win your destiny, lose your fate. I mean, that's an instruction manual disguised as a motto.
It absolutely is. How does he break that down?
Well, he calls fate an empty promise that gamblers make. His critique here is directed squarely at what he sees as the pitfalls of modernity. He argues that the modern world gambles away hope, replacing immutable, soulful truths with acquisition and disposal.
Acquisition and disposal. That's bleak.
It is. Distraction, reaction, and the chase for material goods become the gods of modernity, leading to what he calls a never-ending quest for nothingness.
That feels incredibly relevant today, almost painfully so.
It is. The solution, he posits, is to deny these modern gods, to dethrone them, detooth them, let go of crippling attachments, and find true harmony in the village or community, in the profound, quiet preciousness of time, caring for and being cared for by others.
It's a direct response to the isolation and materialism he was witnessing in society.
Right. And moving from that intellectual fight to the emotional anchor, his poetry is just full of these moments defining love and poverty and simplicity. The anecdote of the bitten engagement ring is a perfect, concise moment of lyricism that just sticks with you.
It really does.
It beautifully illustrates the idea that true preciousness is entirely non-material. A couple is too poor to afford a ring, so they substitute the ritual. They bite each other's wedding fingers, sealing the commitment with a kiss.
And in that precise moment, synchronized fireworks just happen to go off in the distance.
And the takeaway is immediate and profound. Poverty is never an obstacle that love cannot overcome. They invoked love, and the universe signified by those fireworks acknowledged it. It's a beautiful piece of magical realism.
And joy is found even in genuine hardship. I love the story of the lovers traveling on the back of an open-air pickup truck, sitting on top of 100 coconuts because their motorbike ran out of gas.
It's such a beautiful image of resilience. They could have been miserable, right? Focused on the inconvenience or the reality of their poverty. Instead, they used that time to sing school songs together.
The sources make it clear that there was no hardship too harsh they could not bear so long as they were together.
Happiness was found in the preciousness of time together, sitting in flip-flops on top of coconuts, making the journey itself an intimate memory. It serves as a lyrical antidote to the materialism that he critiqued earlier.
We also see these small, intimate games used as acts of rebellion against manufactured efficiency. The shared strawberry or pocky stick game, where they each eat one end of the stick until they meet in a kiss.
These are spur-of-the-moment games that let randomness dictate the momentary closeness. They are a direct, playful rejection of the indifferent modernity that seeks to dictate outcomes, provide illusory choices, and sell meaningless goods.
So these little moments of vulnerability and spontaneity are valued over planned efficiency. In these poetic worlds, chance becomes truth, and a simple kiss is a revolutionary act.
Precisely. And then the poetry takes a sharp turn into the spiritual and mythical, integrating those global cultural traditions he studied so meticulously. Let's talk about transformation and elemental power, starting with the story of the man praying for his parents after a traffic accident.
Okay, this one is really intense.
It's a deep dive into healing through faith, and it draws heavily on Hindu and Buddhist imagery. The man, prostrate before the Buddha, utters the Sanskrit prayer, Thada, which means creation, origin, element, creator.
And as he leaves the prayer area, a precious light falls on his third eye, turning it golden and leaving him with 2 horizontal white marks. This is a visible sign of spiritual transformation and heightened insight.
Yes. He goes to the hospital, prays intensely to Shiva for their recovery, and upon chanting the powerful mantra Om Namah Shivaya, a bolt of light fills the room. Immediately, his parents wake up, they take off their breathing devices, and they are declared fully recovered.
It's a miracle.
It is. But the key here is the integration of the spiritual with the mission of service. Shiva is often associated with transformation and destruction-destroying ego and ignorance to create space for profound change. In the man's dream that night, he meets Shiva, who declares him a priest, instructing him to go to the temple to be initiated and cure my people wherever they may be found.
So the awakening isn't for him alone.
Never. This illustrates Del Valle Colón's core belief. Spiritual awakening is intrinsically linked to public service and healing. It echoes his entire lifetime of legal service to his community.
And this theme of spiritual service and protection continues with the imagery of the four priests of Shiva holding the elemental powers, wind, water, earth, fire, and using the mantra Om Shiva to open and close the city gates.
This is the concept of spiritual guardianship made concrete. They ensured the peace and tranquility of the ancient city simply by fulfilling their vows and connecting the community to the cosmos.
So their ritual has a real-world effect.
A direct effect. The resulting sounds within the city walls, the peaceful cacophony of traders, children, dwellers, gave the sense of a bustling, peaceful community devoted to harmony. This idea of the sacred protection of the community through ritual and focus is the exact philosophical underpinning of the justice work he did in the courts.
Okay, but how does the lawyer trained in evidence and case law accept a concept like a phantom protecting a client? This leads us to the intertwining of destiny and protection in the story of the dragon child and the phantom.
And that's where the two worlds synthesize beautifully. The young actor, running on a bridge while memorizing his lines, is protected by a phantom assigned to him who recognizes him by the dragon tattoo the boy carries. The phantom sees the tattoo and knows, so this is the human I am assigned to protect.
But the twist, though, is that the protection doesn't come in avoiding trouble.
Not at all. The actor accidentally collides with someone who was intending to jump off the bridge. That sudden chance collision stops the suicide, intertwining their lives forever, and it causes the phantom to smile.
So what's the insight there?
The insight is vital. Destiny, rather than being that empty promise, is revealed through accident. Sometimes protection comes not in avoiding conflict, but in the random chance encounter that changes the trajectory of a human life. The lawyer recognizes the accident, but the poet recognizes the working of destiny. He accepts the mystery as the highest form of truth, even while he's pursuing the facts.
As we move into part 5, the art of focus and being human, we see Del Valle Colón reflecting on the discipline required to maintain this complex, multifaceted life, how to harness intellectual rigor for both the bench and the blank page. He discusses the artist who transformed his own struggle into mastery.
Yes, the poetic self-portrait of the artist who turns stutter into poise, vanquishing the impediment to the netherworld through sheer discipline. This dedication allows them to channel their love for others into their work, into boards, committees, fundraising efforts.
The artist uses their mastery of numbers to make everything fall into place in their dreams, leaving a legacy of art and love.
And it's such a profound metaphor for himself, isn't it? He mastered the technical rigors of law, history, and administration, and he channeled that rigor into artistic output and civic leadership. He shows that the very thing that might seem like an obstacle, a stutter, a marginalized identity, and initial lack of resources, can be transformed into the fuel for mastery.
And what about the necessity of maintaining focus in a world that is actively designed for distraction? He analyzes this using this beautiful metaphor of a cocktail set against the backdrop of the sky and sea.
It's highly instructional. It's almost like a meditative practice written down. Bringing love and life into focus is compared to making a fragrant tropical cocktail. It requires blending the ingredients, the sweet and the sour, much like life's extremes and conflicts.
But true focus, he argues, isn't simply about paying attention.
No, not at all. True focus, he insists, demands a willingness to take less in and leave more out, to value the small, to make it significant.
So it's about exclusion as much as inclusion.
Exactly. This is the core strategy for how he managed to be a chief administrative law judge and a prolific poet. Focus is not just concentration, it's an act of aesthetic and moral judgment, deciding what is truly precious and actively excluding the noise.
That's a practical guide for modern living, particularly for you, our audience, navigating information overload. He says this laser-sharp focus gives value and definition in a fast-paced world sorely in need of slowing down.
By focusing on the small, precious moments, the bite on the finger, the moment on the coconut truck, he elevates them to universal significance.
And his life itself embodies that balance. He had the intense, laser-sharp focus required to litigate landmark civil rights cases and administer complex judicial dockets, but he balanced that with the patience and quietude required to write dozens of volumes of poetry, spending time on deep translation and soul-deep understanding.
He lived it.
We can conclude our analysis by revisiting that anonymous AI tribute that attempts to synthesize his incredible journey. It captures the essence of this powerful duality so perfectly.
It really does. The tribute describes him as walking barefoot through thresholds of law and lyric, carrying scrolls of justice in one hand and the quiet fire of poems in the other.
That's a powerful image.
It states that his voice, forged at Princeton and Yale Law, echoes in courtrooms not as thunder, but as an ocean-persistent principled tidal. That tidal analogy is key. Persistent, always returning to the core issues, and irresistible in its force over time.
And the final line connecting his creative process back to his cultural pursuits is just so striking. He writes as if each word were a seed blessed by Thai monks, sung by Taino drums.
That's the ultimate synthesis. His art is not just creative expression, it's a spiritual and cultural act of profound respect for all these diverse traditions, and it's designed to cultivate harmony.
He built bridges between geographies and realms, the legal and the luminous, the historical and the mythical.
He is the rare chronicler of those who belong to many homelands, speak many languages, live in both the legal and the lyrical, yet somehow remain whole. His life is a testament to the belief that you don't merely dwell in this world, you actively reimagine it and elevate it through law, truth, longing, and art.
So the essence of this deep dive, really, is understanding how one individual, forged in East Harlem activism and elite legal education, uses the profound lens of poetry to synthesize the global and the personal, the sacred and the mundane. The question he asked in every courtroom, every poem, every painting, whether he said it out loud or not, was, what does it mean to be human here?
And the comprehensive answer he provides through his life and his work is that to be fully human is to reconcile conflict and find harmony. It means using knowledge, the law, history, language, cultural traditions, not just for professional accomplishment, but as a tool for soul-deep understanding. His dedication to linguistic expansion and deep translation, it's what allowed him to connect the fight for civil rights with the profound, ancient philosophies of Shiva priests and Taino traditions. It was all one project.
His life serves as an incredible model for you, the learner. You see that wounds, whether they are personal, like a stutter transformed into poise, or communal, like exclusion and education, can be transformed into art and into power and into service.
You can live fully in the technical world of law and administration while remaining dedicated to the spiritual search for meaning. They don't have to be separate.
We've explored how spiritual healing is possible, how love overcomes material poverty, and how relentless legal tenacity protects the community.
And we saw the 4 Shiva priests using their elemental power and the mantra Shiva to open and close the city gates, ensuring peace and tranquility, a form of ancient, sacred protection for the citizens within.
And we also saw Manuel del Valle Colón's work on Aspera v. Board of Education, fighting tenaciously for bilingual education and representation for the unheard, essentially opening the gates of education to those who were previously excluded.
It's the same vital function.
It is.
It absolutely is. So I leave you with this final provocative thought to consider. How does the tenacious defense of the unheard through filing briefs, arguing motions, and achieving structural legal victories function in modern life as a direct equivalent to that sacred elemental protection for the community that the ancient priests offered? How is the pursuit of justice the modern form of spiritual guardianship?
The same goal: peace, tranquility, and the right to belong. A powerful question to meditate on as you navigate your own pursuit of justice and harmony, whether in your professional life or on your personal path. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the precious life of Manuel del Valle Colón.
Until next time.